There exist 3 devil fruit categories in the world of One Piece, with each one granting users incredible strength and abilities. However, out of these 3, the Logia devil fruits are said to be the rarest, allowing users to transform their bodies into natural elements, making them immune to all attacks. Today, we'll be explaining and ranking all 17 Logia users, starting with one of the strongest characters in the entire show and a certain record holder, Admiral Kizaru. Kizaru is the user of the Pika Pika no Mi, a Logia devil fruit that allows him to transform into light. The best thing this fruit lets him do is travel at the speed of light, which pretty much makes him the Flash of the One Piece universe. Since Kizaru has had this fruit for several decades, he's developed many interesting ways of using his light abilities in combat. He usually fights by kicking his enemies at light speed, but can also shoot powerful laser beams from his fingers or play it dirty by creating a super bright flash that blinds everyone around him. But even he's not crazy enough to go kicking against a swordsman. That's why when he fought the Dark King Rayleigh, he created a sword of pure light to match him. Although Kizaru comes off as a goof most of the time, he's very serious about his marine duties and always prioritizes his missions. For example, after failing to capture Rayleigh and the Straw Hats, Kizaru got mad, going on a rampage and imprisoning 500 pirates in a single day, which is more than any other marine. So, how does Kizaru compare to some of the strongest characters in the story? Well, he doesn't disappoint. Just recently, he went head-to-head with the new Emperor of the Sea, Luffy. While he didn't exactly win this fight and got paralyzed by Luffy's punch, he showed that he's perfectly capable of holding his own against an Emperor, which earned him a spot in the A tier. Some of you may think that he deserves to be in S tier, but that place is reserved only for absolute monsters, as you'll soon see. But not every Logia element is as cool as light is, and this next character was so unfortunate to get the worst Logia element in the series. Karasu ate the Susu Susu no Mi, a Logia-type devil fruit that allows him to turn into soot, which is pretty much just burned dust. However, he never turns into just regular soot, and instead turns into crows made out of soot. For example, he uses these crows a lot to fly and carry his allies, but also for simpler things like bringing newspapers. This is actually how we get introduced to his ability all the way back in chapter 593. Despite creating crows, Karasu's name literally translates to crow, and he's also dressed as one. Man, this guy has one unhealthy obsession. Anyway, the only real fight Karasu participated in was when the Revolutionary Army attacked Mary Joa to free Kuma. Here, Karasu confidently attacked Admiral Fujitora all by himself, proving just how confident he is in his abilities. Although this is pretty impressive, due to very limited information about his general combat abilities, I'll have to put him in C tier for now. Honey Queen. Honey Queen ate the Toro Toro no Mi, a fruit that lets her turn into and control liquid, specifically syrupy liquid. From what we've seen, she usually uses her abilities to travel through pipes and shoot beams of syrup. Honestly, this fruit has the potential to be really strong, but sadly, Honey Queen just isn't that skilled with it. I mean, she literally lost the battle by getting caught in a jar. Her bounty is also the lowest out of all Logia users, being only 7,800,000 berries. If you're scratching your head thinking, when did she appear in the show? I don't remember her at all. Well, she didn't. She's one of the main antagonists in the One Piece movie, too. Anyway, I think we can all agree that Honey Queen deserves to be our first F-tier Logia user. Let's go back to canon characters now and cover a character who literally has the ability to instantly defeat anyone, no matter how strong they are. Caesar Clown ate the Gasu Gasu no Mi, and while it obviously allows him to transform into gas, he can also fuse with and spread any gas he creates. On top of that, Gasu Gasu no Mi is one of the few Logia fruits that allow the user to fly freely. There are only 2 more Logia fruits like this, but more on that later. Anyway, for an average human, this fruit would be pretty much useless, as it requires vast knowledge about chemistry and gases in order to be used properly. However, if used by a genius like Caesar, this fruit can be unstoppable. For example, using his scientific knowledge, Caesar can surround himself with flammable gas and then ignite it to make an explosion. But the deadliest ability this fruit grants to Caesar is the ability to remove all oxygen around him, making his enemies unable to breathe. This pretty much allows Caesar to defeat enemies much stronger than himself without any effort, as long as he can get close to them. Despite his incredible fruit, Caesar is primarily a scientist, not a fighter, and therefore I think D tier is a fitting place for him. Admiral Green Bull. During the time skip, Green Bull was introduced as one of the new admirals to fill one of the 2 empty spots. As with the majority of the admirals, he has a Logia-type devil fruit called Mori Mori no Mi, which lets him become and control trees, flowers, and grass. Literally the whole forest. Being the Forest Man is definitely a really weird ability, and it has its pros and cons. For example, Green Bull never has to eat because he can photosynthesize like plants, but this also means he can burn very easily due to him being made out of wood and leaves. For traveling purposes, Greenbull can attach a spinning flower to his back that allows him to fly. But how does he utilize this fruit in combat? Well, when fighting weaker enemies, Greenbull mostly commands roots to attack and then drain them of all water. But against stronger foes, he transforms into a huge tree man, which is pretty creative. Now, we never got to see the full extent of Greenbull's powers as Shanks quickly interrupted the fight and very gently asked the Admiral to go home. The only other battle Greenbull took a part in was when the Revolutionary Army attacked Mary Joa, and we already know that didn't go well for the Admirals. Many fans are disappointed with Greenbull's strength so far, but I think he just didn't have his time to shine yet. For now, a B tier seems right for him. However, this next character will never get her time to shine as her story ended in the most unlucky way possible. You see, Monet was first introduced as Caesar's secretary, but later on we found out she was actually a member of the Don Quixote pirates sent to monitor him. She ate the Yuki Yuki no Mi, a Logia-type devil fruit that allows her to control and turn into snow. She mostly uses this snow to capture her opponents, but can also fight by hardening her wings, making them as hard as blades. Aside from turning herself into snow, Monet can also transform into a snow beast when she gets angry. The interesting thing about her is that her wings aren't the result of her devil fruit and aren't made of snow. Those are actual wings given to her by law. During the Punk Hazard arc, Monet was able to easily defeat Tashigi using her powers, but was completely helpless against Zoro, whose presence was enough to freeze her in place. Pretty ironic considering that she's made out of snow. Although Zoro decided to spare her, she didn't live for very long after that, because Caesar accidentally stabbed her heart instead of Smoker's, which has gotta be the unluckiest way to die. Even though Monet had a good mastery of her fruit, I can't place her any higher than E tier, as some of the other characters we'll cover soon are tens or even hundreds of times stronger than her. And one of those characters is the Fleet Admiral Sakazuki. Sakazuki ate the Magu Magu no Mi, which allows him to turn his body into magma. This devil fruit easily takes the spot as the strongest defensive devil fruit in the series, as its raw power is unmatched. Even just a touch from Sakazuki can leave you with a hole in your body. I sure hope this doesn't happen to anyone important. Akainu was the only admiral who fought with Whitebeard one-on-one for an extended period of time, and even gave him some serious injuries. It's also important to mention that even after getting hit by some of Whitebeard's strongest attacks, he still managed to stand up and continue fighting, proving that his defense is as good as his offense. Sakazuki is by far the most serious out of everyone when it comes to his marine duties. I mean, the guy literally destroyed the entire ship full of innocent people just because he thought that some traitors were on it, leaving other marines in shock. Although Sakazuki's attitude usually makes him hated and feared, he has one person in the marines he can call a friend, and that's Kizaru. They joined the marines at the exact same time, and he's the only person Akainu seems to have genuine conversations with. Ever since the time skip, we didn't see much of Sakazuki due to him becoming the Fleet Admiral, which means he rarely fights and just sits in his office all day and screams at people. The only time he got out of his chair was when he went to capture Kuba on Mary Joa, but we didn't see much in terms of his abilities during that fight. Still, Sakazuki is currently the strongest marine officer in the show, and he's going to be a menace when he finally fights for real. Due to this, I think Sakazuki is worthy of being the first S tier on the list, but he might not even be the strongest character we'll cover today, which just goes to show you how insane Logia users are. However, having one of the strongest devil fruits like Sakazuki doesn't mean you'll be as strong as him, which we saw in NL's case. Using the Goro Goro no Mi, a Logia-type devil fruit that allows him to turn into lightning, NL easily took over the entirety of Skypia and became the self-proclaimed god. Most of NL's attacks revolve around attacking his opponents with powerful bolts of lightning. He can freely control the power output he unleashes, up to a maximum of 200 million volts. He was also one of the few people in the early One Piece capable of using observation hockey. For example, he could hear people talking from a really long distance, and if anyone said anything bad about him, he could just smite them down with a lightning strike all the way from his home. NL's ultimate technique is using 200 million volts to transform himself into an electric giant called Amaru, which bears a striking resemblance to the thunder god Raijin. But despite all these incredible powers, NL had one huge weakness. He relied on his devil fruit too much. This is why when he found out Luffy's body was immune to lightning, he didn't know what to do and was quickly defeated. Although this devil fruit is insanely powerful and probably comparable to Admiral's devil fruits in terms of strength, considering NL's flaws and lack of experience, I can't put him any higher than C tier. There's still 9 incredible Logia users left to cover, and let's continue with Sir Crocodile. Crocodile was the first person to completely beat Luffy in a fight, with Luffy not being able to hit him once due to his ability to turn into sand granted by the devil fruit he ate, the Suna Suna no Mi. Crocodile uses this fruit in combat by creating a huge sandstorm or summoning sand spikes from the floor. Aside from this, the Sunasuno no Mi allows him to drain liquid from anything he touches. Now, you may think that's not so special since Green Bull can do it too, but Crocodile did it before it was cool. A whopping 1003 episodes before him. Although this fruit is pretty strong, it has one devastating weakness: water. You see, as soon as Crocodile comes into contact with water, his sand hardens, making him unable to dodge attacks, which allowed Luffy to eventually defeat him during Alabasta. But losing to Luffy this early on doesn't mean that Crocodile is weak, which he showed during the Summit War when he briefly engaged in fights with Mihawk, Doflamingo, and even managed to catch a Kainu off guard. After the time skip, Crocodile became one of the leaders of an Emperor crew, the Cross Guild, and earned himself a bounty of almost 2 billion berries. It's only a matter of time before we see him fighting again, and I think we'll all be surprised by just how strong he's become, which makes B tier a fitting place for him. Simon. One of the weirdest devil fruits in the series absolutely has to be Simon's Pasa Pasa no Mi. This fruit lets him turn into paper, which is pretty odd for a Logia power. Since the paper is really light, Simon is the second character on this list who can freely fly. Simon was a pretty strong guy, with many people saying that his strength was on par with a warlord of the sea. He usually fights by launching a bunch of papers at his enemies, but these are not your usual papers. You see, depending on the symbol he puts on the paper, it could be able to poison, electrocute, or even blow up his enemies. It's likely that none of you heard of Simon, and that's completely understandable since he only appears in the One Piece game for the Game Boy Advance. Portgas D. Ace. Ace was the son of the Pirate King, Goldie Roger, and was in possession of Meta Meta no Mi, a Logia-type devil fruit which allows him to control fire. During fights, Ace would shoot the fire from his fingers like pistols, creating fire waves or even big fireballs. However, his signature attack was transforming his fist into fire, which earned him the nickname Fire Fist Ace. Although Ace was a pre-time skip character, his powers were no joke. For example, on Alabasta, he matched Smoker, who at the time seemed unbeatable, and also destroyed the Baroque Works fleet with a single attack. Later in the story, we also found out that he fought against Yamato on equal footing, which just proves how powerful he was. So yeah, Ace was pretty strong, but his rational thinking could use some work. He wanted to catch his former crewmate Blackbeard, and when he finally found him, he decided to attack him completely alone, which obviously wasn't the smartest thing to do. He was then almost freed during the war, but just had to turn back when Akainu started insulting his captain. And let's just say that magma turned out to be much hotter than fire. Nevertheless, Ace was certainly a powerful pirate, and well deserving of C tier. Up next is the first ever Logia user we've seen in the show, the Vice Admiral Smoker. Smoker ate the Moku Moku no Mi, a devil fruit which lets him turn into, well, you'd never guess it, smoke. Due to Smoke's natural properties, he's another one of those Logia users able to fly. His usual way of catching pirates is surrounding them with dense smoke, trapping them. Most of his other attacks also revolve around dense smoke, like shooting a big cloud or creating a smoke dragon that pursues his enemies. However, the most ridiculous way Smoker uses the power of this fruit is to power his billower bike. Now that I mentioned it, what the heck even happened with this thing? Anyway, ever since Smoker first saw Luffy in Loguetown, he's become kind of obsessed, chasing Luffy into the Grand Line, which created this cool rivalry between them. Although a lot of people absolutely love Smoker as a character, the fact is, ever since he entered the New World, he's only been losing fight after fight. This is why we'll have to place him in the D tier for now. Only 5 more characters are left, and let's continue with one of the strongest active pirates, the Titanic Commander Kuzan. Kuzan's devil fruit, the Hia Hia no Mi, is pretty much an upgraded version of Monet's Yuki Yuki no Mi, since it allows him to literally control the cold itself, rather than just snow. Throughout the show, we've seen Kuzan utilize the power of this fruit in many unique ways, like freezing his enemies, creating weapons out of ice, and even enhancing his fists with ice for additional power. Another interesting thing is that Kuzan can also replace his body parts with ice. This was shown when he lost a leg in a battle against Akainu and replaced it with a fake one made out of ice. While this fruit does not allow Kuzan to fly, he has his own, much cooler way of traveling. He literally freezes a big chunk of the ocean, then rides his bicycle over it. On top of all these incredible abilities, Kuzan's physical strength is also monstrous due to the battleship punching training he did with Garp. During the time skip, Kuzan decided to leave the Marines and join the Blackbeard Pirates as one of the 10 Titanic commanders. This decision eventually led him to fight against his former mentor, the hero of the Marines Garp, who he managed to defeat with some help from his crewmates. It's evident that Kuzan is a top-tier fighter, but since he lost to Sakazuki, I'll have to place him in the A tier. Gasparde. Gasparde is another really weird Logia user. His fruit is called the Ame Ame no Mi, and it allows him to become and control the element of candy syrup. Gasparde usually fights by growing candy spikes out of his body, similar to Miss Doublefinger's Togi Togi no Mi. It's obvious that he hasn't mastered his Logia abilities yet, shown by how surprise attacks still manage to hurt him. But even if we put that aside, Gasparde has another huge weakness: Candy Syrup's natural enemy, flour. You see, touching flour makes Gasparde lose his stickiness, making him vulnerable to non-hockey attacks. Although Gasparde was the main antagonist of One Piece 4th movie, he doesn't appear to be strong at all, as Luffy pretty much beat him up in like 2 minutes. Considering this, it's only natural we place him at the bottom of the tier list. Caribou. Since Caribou reached Sabaody with a bounty of 210 million berries, he was considered one of the supernovas of the new generation, just like Luffy was a couple of years ago. He ate the Numa Numa no Mi, a Logia-type devil fruit that allows him to become a swamp. Caribou utilizes this fruit in fights by drowning people inside his swamp, which acts similarly to quicksand, but sometimes he even shoots a machine gun that he keeps in himself. Yeah, it sounds a bit weird, but he can store whatever he wants inside his swamp. Weapons, people, you name it. We've only seen Caribou's abilities a couple of times, and there's a good reason for that. The man has been through a lot. He was first imprisoned on the Straw Hat ship, then beaten up by Jinbei and left at the Marine base. After he escaped, he was beaten up again by X-Drake and sent to the prison in Wano. Now he finds himself on the Straw Hat ship in that same barrel they used to capture him 500 chapters before. Caribou has no knowledge of hockey and is not very durable, so any opponent with basic armament would most likely beat him in a fight. For that reason, I'll place him in the E tier. Before we cover the last and maybe even the strongest Logia user in the series, let's cover Revolutionary Army's Chief of Staff, Sabo. Sabo obtained the Mera Mera no Mi during the tournament in Dressrosa, stealing it from a chest before the competition even ended. Him consuming the fruit and continuing Ace's legacy just felt right. At first, Sabo struggled to get used to the fruit, but just a little bit later, he was already strong enough to fight against Fujitora and Jesus Burgess. He even ended up defeating Burgess with Ace's signature Fire Fist attack. Although we don't know much about how exactly Sabo uses this fruit in combat, we know that he can combine the fire of Mera Mera no Mi with his Ryosuken martial art in order to deal devastating damage. He was also shown capable of imbuing flames into the weapons he uses. Recently in the story, Sabo sneaked into the Holy Land of Marijoa and met the rulers of the world Inu face to face. Although there was a bunch of strong enemies attacking him, he showed to be resilient and skilled enough to escape. Due to all of this, a solid B tier seems about right for him. And now, let's cover by far the most unique Logia user in the series, whose devil fruit does the exact opposite of what Logia should do. Marshall D. Teach. Although Teach seemed like an ordinary member of the Whitebeard Pirates, it was all just an act, and in reality, the only reason he joined the crew was to find the Yami Yami no Mi, a legendary Logia-type devil fruit that grants the user the power of darkness. The Whitebeard Pirates eventually found this fruit, and Teach had to kill one of his crewmates in order to attain it. This fruit is much different than other Logias, as it doesn't allow Teach to turn into darkness, and regular physical attacks can still hit him. He even stated that any damage he takes will actually hurt worse than normal. However, Yami Yami no Mi more than makes up for these weaknesses, as it literally grants Teach some of the most powerful abilities in the whole show. First of all, Teach can pull things towards himself, similar to the black hole, and once something has been pulled in, it can be absorbed into the darkness, where it will be trapped until Teach himself decides to release it. This is already pretty insane, but there's more. Teach also has the ability to nullify other people's devil fruit powers simply by touching them, which has to be the most broken ability in the entire show. In the span of a few short years, Blackbeard has gone from an unknown pirate to being one of the 4 Emperors of the Sea and having the second highest active bounty in the entire world. With his fruit literally being called the most evil and him being the most evil man, Blackbeard can only be put at the very top of the list in the S tier. But the crazy thing is that we haven't even seen Blackbeard fight that much, but he probably has many other abilities and tricks we don't even know about yet. There's an insane theory about his real powers, and you can click here to watch it next.